Welcome. This is a video about Y-DNA haplogroup DE, but also haplogroup D and E. So DE, but split D and E as well. This video is in function of expanding former videos. When possible, confirming the proposed origin and completing the world map of modern humans. This is more or less the same as filling up the so-called mosaic of humans, of modern humans, or the human mosaic. I will show it in a minute. This is the mosaic I'm talking about. This is Y-DNA mosaic or Y-DNA haplogroups. I try to avoid scientific jargon and use more descriptive names. For instance, scientists won't use mosaic, but I think it describes rather well what you see here. It's patches of colors, etc. Reminding a consensus quickly. Consensus supports mtDNA L and African mitochondrial Eve, which is the same. mtDNA L and African mitochondrial Eve are the same thing, as the mtDNA origin of all humans. And in cases, or more recently, consensus also supports Y-DNA A, a specific one, as the Y-DNA origin of all humans, a kind of an Adam. So they have an Eve. You should take that in the biblical sense, and they have an Adam. In my hypothesis about out of the Americas, you will see that this, let's say, focus on Adam and Eve is much less or non-existent. You will see that in a minute. So they support, let's say, Eve and Adam, but consensus did not present fundamental proofs or of what it supports, and also did not solve the many paradigms that arose and still arise around it, around this consensus. African mitochondrial Eve and Adam. If I would zoom in, you would see here Adam, and you would see here Eve. So this is a consensus map. This is not my map. So you see here a text. I've written it out here. So it's the Y-DNA tree in a graphical form. And so it starts with Adam. Don't know if you can see it. Then A, B, D, E together. That's what we will talk about. In former videos we talked about A, we talked about B, we talked about C, and we talked about Q and R. This time we will talk about DE. So DE is very important for consensus, and it's less important for the out of Americas hypothesis, but it's still very interesting and complementary. So this is another diagram or anagram from consensus. It's not presented as a mosaic, it's presented as a tree. And I stretch it a little bit. So this part was about the mosaic, and this part is about the tree. And so here consensus presents Adam, should be here in the top, in the entry, Adam, and then A, the A, B, E, A, B, E, D0 and D1, D0 and D1, C and F, C and F. This is not complete because there's a lot of letters in between, but it will end with P to give rise to Q and R according to consensus. And the end is the same in the two approaches, but you see in between they are not the same, so they have difficulties, because when they made up consensus, so to speak, it was A, B, C, D, and you see it's not here, it's not A, B, C, D, and it's not here. And according to the approach, the letters are different. You should not worry too much about it if this is all confusing. Here it's interesting that it's visual, especially when I zoom in. And this is interesting because it's a tree. And for consensus, they split it up. The ancestor is in Africa. They don't prove it, but this is consensus. And so that's here on top. And that's in Africa. That's in the, let's say, yellow-brown color. And all this part is in Africa. And then only from D1 it gets out of Africa. That's why the composition here is different than it's here. Because here it's presented as a tree, and here it's presented as a mosaic. But anyhow, you see that consensus has certain difficulties to hold on to their initial letters. That is nothing serious by itself. So fundamentals, and then I, Johannes Mallants, I support and hypothesize that Q and the Amazon forest are the origin, so as the origin of all humans. This conclusion is based on all fundamentals, including all ancestral and migrational markers that all systematically indicate the Amaranth haplogroup Q and the Amazon forest as the origin of all humans. What I sum up here, nothing of this fits for the consensus hypothesis, the one that rises in Africa and the one that rises in the Americas, in the Amazon in fact, but for simplicity we talk about the Americas. They all support this, and they don't present, or present only a fraction of the paradigms that the consensus hypothesis presents. In fact, there is nothing wrong about this mosaic. It's very interesting. It's a very special effort, probably a work of years or decades. so it's really a feat. But the arrows here, arrows, and this sequence is the input of consensus to try to make their point. And I personally think that's a pity, because it's not supported by fundamentals or ancestrality and migrational markers. So for me the map would be more worthwhile if it was without the arrows, without talking about Adam and Eve, because in fact it's insignificant. I will explain this better afterwards. Adam is just a word, there's not some patch or color, and Eve, that's the same. The haplogroup of Eve has some presence, not in this map, and the haplogroup of Adam is not here because he doesn't has a group, but his subgroup, which is A, is present. It's here rows and here rows. So while not very significant, at least A is present on the map, but Adam is insignificant, is a hypothesis, and Eve is a hypothesis. They were never found. They were never found. There's no ancient DNA of Adam or Eve, and it's not supported by fundamental proofs and not by migrational and ancestrality markers. While the Amazon amaranth, and the origin being in the Amazon forest, is supported by all fundamentals and by all ancestrality and migrational markers. So I call the out of the Americas, or out of the Amazon, I call it out of Americas hypothesis. And while there are tens and probably hundreds of not genetical and not marker indications of the amaranth and Q, and the Amazon being the origin, I rarely show these because the fundamentals and the lack of paradigms, contradictions in this hypothesis are more than sufficient proof. So in both hypotheses, consensus and out of Americas, E comes from D and D follows up C. So they have this in common. So this video is to show that E comes from D and that D follows C. So this is nice, eh? C, D, E. This way, in fact, I'm serving better because they don't have this CDE. So you won't see this sequence here, and they don't have this CDE. I will show proof CDE. This way we can complete the human mosaic behind 80%, far behind, and close to 100% with only four haplogroups to go: Q, C, D and E. So in the case of Q being the origin, if you consider what comes after the origin, then we cover the planet with C, D and E. That's why I'm kind of eager to expand what we had with D and E. And in fact I'm serving consensus because I'm confirming their initial sequence. I'm confirming A, B, C, D, E, while they don't do that anymore. But as said elsewhere and in former videos, A and B make not much difference in the objective of this video, that is completing the mosaic, because they probably represent less than 2%. But so, apart from this video proving C, D, E, it will prove A, B, C, D, E out of America and consensus. CDE after A and B, elegantly in sequence, alphabetical order, is obviously what consensus claimed in the beginning. So it's obvious because of the letters A, B, C, D, E, etc. It goes further. But I won't go behind the E because we don't need it for our objective. But as said, right now consensus presents CDE differently. And I leave it to consensus to explain why they changed and why they interrupt the series. Why it's not A, B, C, D, E, F, and etc. anymore. So I just present what they do. This was the tree above, the mosaic, and this was the tree below. This was the mosaic above, and this is the tree below. They both start with Adam, but they are a bit different in the middle, and I will show that you can prove what you need to prove with the right sequence. So this was the out of Africa and consensus, and now out of America hypothesis Q, Y, D, and A haplogroup Q, and the amaranth being the origin. GM Johannes Mallants, my name, the author. Q, C, R have their roots and cradles in the Americas. That is proven in other videos. So my order already was Q, Adam, the origin. A, B, because it doesn't make a lot of difference. It has to do with Africa, and that's fine. C, and in later instances R, because it's so recent and because it's so important, so dominant today in Western Eurasia. The important thing is that they are very important. They cover 80% of the planet, of the mosaic, and their roots and cradles are in the Americas. That is not what one would expect. So, and again, A and B can stay nicely where they are. They have to do with Africa. In my hypothesis, in details of the hypothesis, you will see that they don't get out of Africa, or if they ever got, they were pushed back, or they were eliminated in the turnover event that we know as the horseman turnover event, and that I sometimes call the Younger Dryas turnover event. More or less 4,000 years ago that it came to a close. So this has to do with other videos. So this is about D and E. So, and how is Adam suddenly 2 continents large, while before it was 1 Adam and 1 Eve, and they were not even found. And now I will present the Americas as Adam, and suddenly Adam is 2 continents large to populate the world, to fill up the mosaic. And that is how it should be. 2 people, a couple, or an Eve and an Adam, that sounds nice, but they are not able to populate the world. Not even the small group would be able, especially when a small group would present founder effects and bottleneck effects. For now, if you don't know what founder effects and bottleneck effects are, then think of it as systematic interbreeding from the beginning to the end. You know that doesn't work. It's against science, against biological laws. This interbreeding, or these founder effects and bottleneck effects out of Africa, starting from Adam and Eve, would certainly present all these negative effects, violating the biological laws. And once again, the into the Americas, this is not out of the Americas, the into the Americas, that is a part of the out of the Americas, because they have to explain the Amarants in the Americas. And around 1500 there were as much Amarants in the Americas as there were Europeans or Western Europeans in the rest of the world. And I claim the Amarants were already in decline, at least for 500 years. In the past, consensus kind of bragged that this was about small numbers of groups, or Adam and Eve, that nearly went extinct but made it. That is not realistic. I don't hear that much anymore. So the bigger the group, the better, or rather the more realistic and in line with biological laws. So I do not feel the need to defend the continental size of the origin, as it in fact should be a premise, a condition sine qua non. When you claim that something is the origin, then you should present something of continental or near continental size. And later you will see that the real origin is the Amazon forest, which is quite large, by the way. It's quite large. It's part of, I think, 7 large South American countries. And if you combine what scientists and publications tell, independently of what we're talking about now, scientists and publications about the subject tell us that of the Americas, first South America was populated, and then a star-like spreading from the Amazon took place. And that's in fact in line with the Amazon amaranth being the origin, Q being the origin, the Amazon forest being the origin. Except they don't go against consensus, they just say the beginning of the population of the Americas is in South America, in the Amazon forest, and then it spread in a star-like configuration. So this is enough for this first video. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.